Hey, hello everyone. I hope you guys hear me well. I don't have a fancy mic, but I hope it will be enough for you guys. All right, so today I'm going to show you how to use TwicPics to optimize your images. So first, let me just show you that I'm building from the repo, the Vue.js Forge, the project. So let me just run my dev server, open it here, and okay, we have the app running, so we're ready to go. So if you looked at the loading of this page, you might have noticed that the image is taking a fair share of time to load. If I empty my cache and hard reload, we will see that it takes a bit of time to load. Okay, so obviously this is not ideal for your users. It might not matter much here, but it can be very, very impactful on a bigger application. And even here, it's pretty ugly. It's not very user-friendly. And if we look at the network tab, we can see that the image that is loaded here is actually 3.5 megabytes. So that's very heavy. And if we look at the element, I hope you can see in my DevTools. I will zoom just a bit more to make sure of that. We can see that that is because the intrinsic size of this image is something like 6,000 pixels when the rendered size is only 380. So that's obviously useless. The idea would be to have an intrinsic size that matches the rendered size. But obviously, as a developer, you don't want to have to manage all that different versions of the image, and neither wants your design team really. So the ideal solution would be to use JavaScript to handle that for us. And that's what we're going to do today with TwicPics. I'm going to show you how to use the TwicPic components, and I'm going to show you in a way that it comes as a drop-in replacement for the image tag. Okay, so let's go to the TwicPic documentation and see how we can install it. On the left side menu, we can see that there is a component entries, and we can choose the Vue 3 component because we're running with Vue today, and see how it installs. All right, we just need to add a npm package to install the component. So let's do that here. And all right, it's installed already. And then we'll set up the plugin because TwicPic components come as a Vue 3 plugin. So the plugin should be installed in the main.ts file. So I'm going to import TwicPics here next to the other plugins that are import, such as Pinia, for instance. And I see that I also need to import some style. So let's import it just below the rest of the CSS. This CSS is responsible for implementing all the images best practices, and I will get back to that later on. And here I can see that plugins are installed here. We have use router, use create Pinia, and I will just add a use parameter here, and I will install TwicPics and give it a domain parameter. Now I can see here that the domain I need to fill in is actually my very own domain. This is what you can find in your TwicPics back office. Really, this is the kind of data you don't want to hard code, but use an environment variable for. So I haven't set it up yet, but I know I will. So I can import it from import meta conf, and let's say it will be called bit TwicPics URL. All right, so now if I open my env file, I can copy my domain in it. All right, and now that I have my domain set up, if I save this, we can see the app has been rebuilding here. And if I check the head of my HTML, I can see that a script tag has been added, and it's actually pointing to my TwicPics domain. So this means that it is installed successfully, and we can get to work. All right, so now that we have TwicPic installed, we will work in the AppImage component. This AppImage component that we see on the left side is called in the, I think it's board card component. Yep, it's called here. All right, so what we want to do is update the AppImage component in the way that the board card component shouldn't care about it, and the image should just be optimized. Will we use the TwicImg component to do that? But if we look at the src from our image tag, we can see that the image is coming from our file stack content storage. To benefit from all the optimization from TwicPics, we need to pull it from the TwicPics domain instead. This is something you probably already have configured in your back office, but if not, I'll just show you quickly how. But before that, let's define a script section. We'll define a script section so that we can pull the src attribute, make our little modifications, and then use that to power the TwicPics component. We don't see any src attribute here because we only have one element, and Vue 3 is by default inheriting all attributes. So the src is pulled from what's defined here, even though it's not defined as a prop. So let's start by defining the props. And our props interface is going fairly straightforward. It's just a string attribute, an src rather, of type string. And we'll pull that src that we're going to use as a reference from the props so that we can keep that reactivity. And now we're going to use that src attribute to build our TwicPics URL and use that in the template. So I think a computed property would be perfectly suited here. So what I do is have a computed property called TwicPics URL, for instance. Use computed property, and that will return, well, something, a string. Simple as that. So now to make the little URL switch, we will build a small function that simply transform our URL. So let's call it TwicPics URL. It takes a URL that is a string and will return the same URL basically, but instead of having our domain here, our storage domain, which is HTTPS CDN file stack content. So let me copy and paste that here. Instead of having this domain, we'll actually have, well, nothing. So for you to completely understand what I'm doing here, I think it's important to show you the TwicPic back office. So in my TwicPic back office, on my domain, this is not the exact same domain I'm using for the code. This is my personal domain because this is my workspace. The domain I'm using in the code is the one Daniel set up for me, but it works the same. In my domain, when I created a path, I said that my source URL, meaning where my files are currently stored, would be cdn filestackcontent.com. And the path, I will just leave it empty so that TwicPics will map the root of my TwicPics storage to the file stack content domain. And that's why I don't need to supply anything here. And by doing so, we will end up with a URL, which is basically just the name of the file. And that will be enough for TwicPics to say, OK, I know root is mapped to cdn.filestackcontent.com. And TwicPics will be able to fetch your image from the storage server, optimize it, and deliver it in your application. So now that we have our function built in here, we can just have the URL here that we'll build using this function. We'll give it the src value, and here we can just return the URL. Obviously, this is a lot verbose, but it's just so everyone can follow along. So now we have our computed property that is the TwicPic URL, and we need to bind it in the template. So instead of using the img component, img tag rather, I will use the TwicImg tag. Use that because we installed TwicPics as a plugin earlier. And as I told you, TwicImg is a drop-in replacement for IMG, so I have an src attribute to which I can bind TwicPics URL. And if I save and refresh here with any luck, we should see our image. So now, maybe you didn't get to see it, so I will reload again. But what happened is that first we had a blurry version of the image, and then we got the full quality image. So empty cache and hard reload again. And maybe you got to see it this time, I'm not sure. However, you gotta trust me, because if you look at the network tab, we can see here that first there is, okay, there's many images loading, so I need to find the correct one. Okay, great. We can see here that first there is a blurry version of the image that was loaded. And then after that, there was the full quality image. And if we look at the blurry version one, we can see it's only 1 kilobyte. So that's like infinitely smaller than the 3.5 megabytes image we had earlier. And it's that small because we can see the type here, it's SVG. So it's super fast to load, and that will load instantly in your application. So you get the blurry version. And after that, we have the actual image we want to have, which is the full quality image. And even that one is much smaller with only 18 kilobytes here. And we can see that the type of the image also changed. It's not JPEG anymore. I don't know if you saw it earlier. I forgot to show you actually, but it was JPEG. This time, this is WebP. And WebP is much more performant in terms of compression and as well as in terms of performance. And I didn't have to specify anything for that. It's just TwicPics understanding that I am using a modern browser, and all modern browsers support WebP, so it just sent me WebP by default, which is the best practice. But if I look at the code that is generated, I can see here that I have my image, the WebP one we just talked about, but now my image is actually wrapped into a div. And if we look at that div, it has a background image URL, which is our blurry picture. So why do we have that? First, the blurry picture stands as a what we call a low quality image placeholder, so that when the user comes, he knows that there's content here and it sees it kind of loading because it's blurry. And then when the image that is a bit heavier is finished loading, TwicPics will add a tweak done class here and change the opacity. And that's how we get that smooth transition effect from blurry to full quality image. So just by replacing our image tag with TwicIMG, we got we got to improve two things actually. First, we improved the performance because of instead of loading 3.5 megabytes, we loaded something like in total maybe 20 kilobytes. And on top of that, because we have a wrapper, this wrapper also act as a how can I call it? It will reserve the space on the page so that you don't have layout shift when the image loads. You may be familiar with this, like if you go to a blog or whatever and quickly start scrolling to the content you're looking for. And after the images finish loading, actually, you will have like huge layout shift and the whole page will scroll down and you have to scroll again to find what you were looking. By having this div wrap up your image, you avoid that. The space is booked, there is the image placeholder blurry on top of it, and once the actual image tag is finished loading, then you have this smooth transition to your real image. So smooth loading plus, improved performance. But now, if you looked closely and imagine you have, I'm not reading the chat, but I imagine you have, the image we see here isn't exactly looking like the one we had previously. Like we were able to see the full list in the picture, and now we can't see it anymore. And if we hover about the tag here, we can see that the image is actually too big for the board card. So it seems like we have a problem with aspect ratio. So if I was to look at TwicPics documentation about this, Let me scroll down to it. Okay, I can see that my TwicImg component has a ratio property. So if I look at that property docs, I can see TwicPics expect a width per height value as to understand how to display the image. However, I could just write like ratio equals 16 to 9 here, but I don't want to do this. And I don't want to do this because first, my component will not be my AppImage component will not be a drop-in replacement to the image tag. But on top of that, I know because I've looked at the code that here in my board card component, I'm already applying an aspect video class. And if I look at the CSS from this class, it's already set the aspect ratio. So the CSS is already defined to say, hey, this image should be 16:9. So instead of redefining this in my TwicPic code, I will instead use the ratio equals none property value for this property. And what it does, it says to TwicPics, hey, I know how to write CSS, so my image has already the correct size. So please just leave it up to reading the CSS to know which size it should be. And if I save here, we can see it has reloaded. And now it looks exactly like what we had before. And if I inspect my code and go in the network tab, I like to use the network tab for this. I find it more practical. We can see, well, we should be able to see, but I can't move this because I have zoomed in. So let's use the inspect view element. We can see now that the rendered size of the image is actually the same as its intrinsic size. Wait, it should show the intrinsic size. Well, it doesn't show it, but if you look at the URL generated by TwicPics, we can see that TwicPics automatically added the cover equals transformation, and the parameters we have here are exactly the rendered size for my image. So now we have an image that is pixel perfect, perfectly resized and perfectly cropped for what would be outside the frame, so that it matches exactly what and how we want to render it. So that's even more performant, and obviously it's what we wanted, so that it looks exactly as what we wanted to see. But when I say pixel perfect, I really, really mean it. I didn't change. I set my DPR to 1 to simplify the math here. DPR stands for device pixel ratio, basically, so that if you're using a Retina screen, you probably have a DPR of 2 or 3. And if I set my DPR to 2 here, and I hit refresh, inspect again, this time I can see that the rendered size is actually different than the intrinsic size. The intrinsic size of the image is twice as big, and we can see that the TwicPic transformation that is applied is for a bigger image. That is because TwicPics understood that because I have more pixels on my screen because of my DPR of 2, I can have a higher quality image displayed in that tiny 380 pixel card. So you can play along with the DPR and you will see that the image keeps on uploading. And again, I didn't have to specify anything for that. My code doesn't change depending on the DPR of the users. It doesn't change depending on how my AppImage component is consumed. And if I was to say here, add aspect square instead of video, we would see that the image changed and the code changed immediately, but we'd still get all the performance optimization. So I think that concludes the practice section for my part of the talk. So I will close this by just adding that here we only dove into the optimization part. But as you can see here, TwicPics is able to generate transformation as well. So you can do things like resize image, reverse them, change the color, crop them, add rounded corner, everything you would need to know basically to transform your images using this syntax here, and everything that I showed you for the Twig IMG component is also true for the Twig video component. And in the same way where this one is a drop-in replacement for the base IMG tag, Twig video is a drop-in replacement for the video tag, and you get all the optimization for free. On top of that, what is cool is that you don't need to cache your assets here with a CDN or something, because the CDN is included in TwicPics. So this image is actually already cached near your users. So when you add TwicPics, you don't have to change anything to your storage. It's going to fetch your data while your image is there, optimize it on TwicPics server, and cache it in a CDN close to your users. So you really get the best performance you can get in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of best practice to tackle issues such as CLS, content layout shift, and low quality image placeholder. I hope this was useful for you guys. If you have any questions regarding TwicPics when you get to implementing it in your projects, just ask them in the Discord channel, and me and the other mentors would be super happy to help you with that.
Oh, thank you very much, Laurent, for your explanation. That was awesome. Everyone was hyped as well in the chat, and they love what you said your way. And
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you. You're welcome. It was a pleasure for me
thanks a
too.
lot for that. So, well, we have a bunch of questions coming to you. People love to
Okay.
ask you questions, I guess.
I hope I can do well in answering them.
All right. So let's start with the first one. This is the first one. So the plug and play functionality of TweetPics is amazing. Are there any other notable features you didn't get to mention already?
I got to it at the very end when I was talking about transformation. This can be an important part of building an application, and if you ever got to do it manually, you will see that building a transformation system is super hard. Optimizing image is super hard. And yeah, the TweetPics API can also do that. And what I like about this API is that you can see here the syntax with the slash, and you can actually chain transformation that way, so that you can write it in a functional programming way, so that result of that gets into that, into that, into that, into that. So it's a bit of syntactic sugar, but I guess if you're writing transformation often, it's the kind of thing you're happy to have.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for answering that. So our next question is, fetching the correct image size takes running some client-side JavaScript. Have you found any scenarios where this process talks more than that just fetching the original image?
So first, no, I haven't found, but more because I haven't yet get to do that. Someone more experienced in my company may get to give you the full answer. But the general idea is that because we have this image placeholder that is SVG, it's very, very unlikely that you get smaller than 1 kilobyte image. And right here, we're using Vue to build an SPA. So you actually need to hydrate the DOM and run the JavaScript to fetch that. But if you were implementing it in a server-side generated or server-side rendered application, you would have in your the wrapper we talked about, the div that wraps the image, you would already have the image URL of the SVG in here. So it takes no JavaScript to load that. It takes JavaScript then to make the smooth transition, add the class and stuff, but not to load your image placeholder. So it seems like not really an issue to me, if I got the question correctly.
That's a great answer. Thank you. So the next question is, does TweetPics serve images from a CDN?
Yeah, we serve our images from our CDN. So yeah, there's like more than 20 of them around the planet. So yeah, there's probably one close to where your users are. And if you were to use our enterprise features, we can even customize that so that it's served from your CDN if you have one instead of ours. But if you don't have one, we take care of it so that you get everything out of the box.
Right. That sounds great. We have a bunch of them, so I would love to just wrap it up here. Sorry for that. We love to talk to you. We love your session. Thank you very much for contributing to that. I
Thank
really
you.
encourage you to go ahead and check out the chat. People are asking a lot of good questions, but yeah, for the time's sake,
Cool.
we
I
cannot
will.
all of them. But hopefully, you can just go ahead and answer them there. That would be awesome from you.
Yeah, for
Thank you
sure.
very
I
much.
will. I'll try and have a look. Thank you guys for
Yeah,
having me.
it was
See
a
you
pleasure
soon.
having you. Thanks.